In this unit, we deal with how modern business fits in with our environment and how we incorporate the total concept of social corporate responsibility. Going green has become a top subject in modern-day business ethical discussions. Actually, it's become quite a fashionable term. How many ads do you see that tout a company's efforts to become more environmentally sensitive? Subjects such as global warming, energy conservation, reduced carbon emissions, and recycling are all top of mind. So in this unit, we'll deal with what some say business and social corporate responsibility should be. Notice that I said some say. There's a bitter controversy over what is actually doing good as opposed to simply feeling good. Now we need to deal with questions of how market-based economies might play against regulatory-based policies. How much can business do or be willing to do to solve environmental problems? How much law should actually come from government? Or can public opinion have an effect? Can concepts called sustainable development or sustainable business do any real good, or at least can they do enough real good? Will eco-efficiency and biomimicry do any good? On the other hand, we might ask ourselves if the pressure to do so much good would actually cause too many bad problems, so that the so-called doing good itself might actually be unethical. Could we see questions like that? An idea born in Europe and now spreading to America and Asia is the concept known as sustainability. And it's based on what's called the triple bottom line approach. That's where business success is measured in terms of economic, ethical, and environmental sustainability. Proponents see environmental responsibility now as a fundamental part of business practice. These supporters point to many of the profitable opportunities by doing the right thing for the good of the environment. Remember the hippie granola crunchers of the 1970s? Well, they turned the granola products into big business and a base of today's modern health food industry. Supporters point to the natural environment itself supporting its own set of values, and that we need to take actions to prevent the environment from degradation. Now, the text makes a point that we all depend on the natural environment for our own survival. We need clean water, clean air, fertile soil, and the oceans to produce our food, for instance, and we need an ozone layer to screen out harmful solar radiation and a biosphere to balance all of these just to keep ourselves alive. So how does business fit in with protecting our environment? Well, the text does bring up the debate in whether efficient markets or government regulation is the best approach. The market approach argues that there is optimal levels of pollution that we should consider, that spreading out over the entire world can generally be acceptable to most people and still enable local economies to flourish. Safe water and air quality levels, for instance, would balance the risks against the benefits. So basically, we're willing to pay for reducing pollution as long as the benefits outweigh the costs. Now, problems with the market approach are that there are no prices that the market puts on social good, and that policies depend on our own individual decisions of what we're willing to do to protect the environment. The text points to the market approach as failing when it comes to preserving endangered species, for instance, or rare wilderness areas. But there's one question that's always come to my mind then. Why then is there no shortage of cows, pigs, chickens, and horses? Well, they're privately owned, and their owners have an interest in keeping them alive and reproducing. With certain species of wild birds and other animals that no one owns, is there really any individual incentive in keeping them alive? Back in the 1930s, did anyone really care if the dodo bird survived? On the other hand, I wonder how many buffalo or salmon we'd have nowadays if somebody actually owned them. Then again, public policy can be credited with bringing the bald eagle and the California condor back from the brink of extinction. Up until about the 1970s, there was little government involvement. Species themselves, animals and plant life, had no legal standing, and business was pretty well unfettered in pursuing its own ends with no environmental constraints. The argument arose that if business only has to obey the law, then it won't do anything more than to obey the letter of the law. But environmental problems can extend far beyond what the law prescribes and won't confine themselves necessarily to legal limits. And the argument goes that economic growth is not environmentally or ethically benign. By the 1980s, sustainable development and sustainable business practices started emerging in environmental and economic thinking. There are three goals known as the three pillars of sustainability: economic, environmental, and ethical. Now, this goes back to 1987 and a United Nations report from the World Commission on Environment and Development, known as the Brundtland Commission. Now, the thinking here was that sustainable, modern, forward-looking thought offered more opportunities for business to prosper and still be environmentally responsible. Now, it calls on us to do some things: to eliminate or minimize waste, efficiently use natural resources, and that energy supplies should be renewable and rely on the sun, which is called the only renewable energy source. The environmental movement also calls on us to adopt policies of eco-efficiency and biomimicry. Now, eco-efficiency is doing more with less, such as driving smaller cars or more fuel-efficient cars, or even riding a bike to work instead of driving. Biomimicry is using our waste products and even our garbage as a resource in making new items, basically and gradually eliminating our waste because we keep using it up. Now, all of this may sound good, but even I have to say it goes pretty much unchallenged by our text authors. Controversy and reality within the scientific and political communities is huge, and it does spill over into our ethical approach. Now, few of us will argue that we all benefit from clean water, air, and the preservation of our natural resources, plants and wild animals. Well, what about the approach being taken to do this, though? What are the personal or the political motives that those who back these policies? Is there as much of an effort to denigrate or even destroy the free enterprise system as there is to so-called preserve the environmental quality? This brings up an interesting quote. Back in 2007, Czechoslovakian President Václav Klaus, a survivor of communism, told the U.S. Congress that ambitious environmentalism has become the new communism in seeking to bring down the free enterprise system. Professor Anil Karnani of the University of Michigan argues that no matter what, business will be motivated to do the environmentally right thing only when it's profitable. He says otherwise we get companies that claim to be doing good for the environment when they're only, in fact, greenwashing. And Professor Bjorn Lomborg of the University of Copenhagen has become somewhat of a spokesman for the skeptical side of the environmental argument. He authored the books The Skeptical Environmentalist and Cool It. Now, Lomborg basically argues that the frenzy over the environment is misplaced, that global warming, or for instance, is not as serious as it's presented to be, and would actually cost too much with too little benefit over the years to try to solve. Lomborg argues that we're actually better off solving immediate problems such as clean water and air, rural literacy, and eliminating AIDS, for example, that they would actually have positive environmental results in the long run, but also results for us now. So if we waste money on trying to solve an indirect problem that's too big to solve, he asked, is that ethical? Demanding the use of solar and wind power brings out critics who say these don't produce enough electricity to make them worthwhile. Is a hardline approach to requiring the development of these sources ethical? Is it ethical to ban or block the development of nuclear power, which is a proven technology in producing huge amounts of electricity? Is that ethical? The pesticide DDT, which was effective in combating malaria, was banned for other environmental reasons, but with so many who died of malaria, was that ethical? So just because doing something in the name of protecting the environment may sound or feel good, does that mean we're actually doing good? Well, this is a debate that'll rage on for as far ahead as we can see.